Welcome to the Jack Mountain Bushcraft Podcast, episode 112.
Welcome to the Jack Mountain Bushcraft Podcast with your host, Jack Mountain Bushcraft School founder and Master Main Guide, Tim Smith.
I'm your host, Tim Smith. I'm a registered Master Main Guide and have been a full-time outdoor instructor and guide since founding the Jack Mountain Bushcraft School in 1999. We help people become more skilled, more knowledgeable, more experienced, and more confident in the natural world through our bushcraft and guide training semester programs and multi-week canoe and snowshoe expeditions. You can check out the show notes to all of our podcasts at blog.jackmtn.com. If you're interested in learning more about our college-accredited and GI Bill-approved programs, visit the Jack Mountain Bushcraft School on the web at jackmtn.com. And check out our online network and digital learning academy at bushcraftschool.com. Hello and welcome back to the Jack Mountain Bushcraft Podcast for episode 112. Paul Sveum and I continue our discussion about 10 things he wished that someone had told him when he was getting started with fly fishing. This episode runs just shy of an hour, so let's just get right to it. Welcome back to the podcast, Paul Sveum. We are here to talk about the second half of our previous discussion about 10 things that you wish somebody had told you when you got started in fly fishing. So, first of all, you were just telling me how it's unseasonably warm in central Maine. Are you in central Maine or mid-coast Maine? What would you say?
I always say that we're like southern Maine.
Okay.
But not growing up here, I don't have the right terminology. Then people are like, no, that's like Portland or further south. I think we're central Maine. I think it's south central Maine. Yeah.
Okay. Where would you draw the line at southern Maine?
So I always go back to relating every state to Wisconsin. That's where I'm from, and that's my barometer for what a state looks like. And so for me, Bangor, and if you're a Wisconsinite, you're going to get it. If you don't, get a map out. Bangor is like Wausau, Wisconsin. They're that last community before the north. Everything north of Bangor is the north to me. Everything north of Wausau is the north. Wausau to Madison or Bangor to Augusta to me is like the central part of the state. And then Madison south, Augusta south. That's southern Wisconsin, southern Maine. So I think we're kind of in the transitional zone.
Okay.
It's a biological edge between southern and central Maine.
I'll buy that.
Yeah. Plus everything's a mitten to me. I've showed you this before. Wisconsin, Michigan, Maine. You hold up your hand like a mitten, that's the state.
Excellent. I knew a guy from Wausau once.
That's very random.
It's not, this isn't a one, there once was a man from Nantucket sort of limerick, but I did know a young man from Wausau, Chad Zowen.
Man, if Chad's listening right now, can you imagine how excited he is?
Yeah, to get called out. I mean, this thing gets like literally cajillions of downloads.
Cajillion.
Yeah.
Well, and I learned a new number. If you pull up the podcast, pull up the blog that I wrote, that was the part 2 of this. I had to give myself a little bit of space to get rambly in the beginning because I write a lot. My brain thinks fast. I learned the new number, which is the quintillion. I guess I probably could have figured out what that meant, but I had never any context for it, except for the fact that the game of checkers has 500 quintillion possible moves in every single game.
I read that.
It up. Yeah.
I read that online. Actually, I read the blog that you wrote.
I'm happy that I'm still teaching you some new things.
So can we get serious here? Where you said that chess and checkers are the 2 best-selling and most important board games of all times?
I feel like you've got an angle that you're going to throw another game out there.
Like Chutes and Ladders.
It is, except for the fact that game is a game of chance, not a game of skill. I mean, yeah, you could like cheat a little bit, which makes it a game of skill, but Chutes and Ladders is like roulette. It's black, white, or green. Chutes and Ladders is just rolling the dice.
Okay, I
So
see
to
where
me,
you're
it's like a
going
separate
there.
category. You see that? And so checkers and chess are the two most popular games, I'm just going to say, of all time, just because I can. And this is, we're on the internet, which makes me an expert, which makes that true.
Someone in like a few days, one of our quintillion number of listeners will say that those are the oldest and most important two games, and they know it's so because they heard it on the internet.
And you heard someone saying it on the internet. So
There's a lot of power there in our era of kind of misinformation, disinformation. I remember being a kid, if somebody said something on TV, it was like accepted as the truth. And it's interesting that we still sort of have that, even though any knucklehead can throw something on the internet. It's still, when you hear someone else say it in like a sort of broadcast kind of capacity, it seems to carry similar weight, although much less, but there's still like a twinge of that, if you will.
Oh yeah, look at Robert Stack. Like, he's the voice that comes in my head, Unsolved Mysteries, where like, I'm pretty sure most of that show was wildly not true. But man, when he said it, like I believe that there was a ghost haunting that grist mill and, you know, torturing its current occupants.
Yeah. Or, you know, the ancient alien guy. Like, everything that guy says is true.
It's true. I remember we've talked about this before with the printed word too, that, you know, because we both have a book problem, and there is so much power that goes into the printed word versus the spoken word. So you and I could be talking about, you know, some aspect of bushcraft or whatever, but if you print it and then someone has to buy that in a magazine or a book, it carries so much more authority and weight for a good reason. You know, the printed word was wildly important and powerful over the last, 1,000 years? Where's our history buffs out there?
Like, when did Steve Gutenberg invent the movable type?
I think it was when he was writing the script for House Party 2.
It was before he starred in Three Men and a Baby. I can tell you that, along with Ted Danson and who was the third in that? Geez, I don't know.
I wanted to. Joey from Full House popped in my head, and I know that was not the actor.
Anyway, Steve
cool.
Gutenberg, nothing that guy can't do. First, he invented the printing press. Then he starred in a whole bunch of awesome 80s movies. I don't know what he's doing now, but it's probably something pretty spectacular. Which brings me to my big point about me being, I am currently in Austin, Texas.
You're still in Texas.
I am still in Texas. But, you know, one of my big heroes, the guy who invented radio, right? Tesla, if you've heard of him, also responsible for the alternating current on which most of our houses still run, electricity. So he was a big wheel there, and it had this huge impact on the technological world, and still is to this day. Went a little dark and quiet for a little bit, and then was like in this awesome 80s rock band out of Sacramento, California. And then, you know, they did their thing, still one of the greatest bands of all time. And then he started this electric car company and moved to Austin, Texas. And I'm like, this guy's always been a hero of mine. I'm going to go meet him. And I came down here, and, you know, I can't seem to find him. There's some other guy that he made like the CEO of the company, and he's running around in the media all the time, you know, doing this and that. And, but I haven't been able to find Tesla himself. But, you know, what a guy, you know. Electricity, radio, rock bands, and electric cars. Nothing that guy can't do.
You know, I wish that people listening to this could be a part of the visual moment to this, because we've known each other for a long time. Probably going
20
on
years.
20 years. And I know as soon as the first syllable comes out of your mouth when you're going into the long, drawn out joke. And I think what's most entertaining.
What are you talking about?
What's most entertaining to me is not the joke itself, but watching your face while you're like 2 or 3 minutes into like a 5-minute long punchline. That's the comedy gold right there.
All right, I don't even know what's going on now.
I don't know. So what I was saying before you started recording us was that everything's weird right now. Like, I woke up, it's weird. I haven't been sleeping, which is weird. And right now in South Central Maine, it's like 55 degrees and windy. And overnight we like lost all of our snow, which I don't know. I think it's like the warmth and at this time of year when it's not supposed to really be this warm, I've already thought about getting the syruping equipment out, which is weird. It's like 3 weeks early. And so it's put me in a weird mood. And
there's always a couple of weird, like Northern New England always has a few weird weather events. I mean, it's easy now to sort of pile on and say it's all climate change and global warming, but there's always been a few weird warming events. We were on a snowshoe trip once, and I referenced this weather event pretty regularly. We were out on the back 40 of Squapan, a couple of miles anyway, down from the dam where we park. And it was like 40 below at night. And then in 24 hours, it warmed up to 50 above and poured rain. So it was like literally a 90-degree temperature swing in 24 hours. And there's nothing worse. If you're out on a snowshoe expedition, there's nothing worse than like a thaw and a rain. People think, oh, it's warm, it's better, it's easier. Like that's the worst because you're stuck. You can't travel. You can't haul sleds. It's tough to even get out to get a stick of firewood. Everything's wet and frozen, and it's just brutal. So, yeah, that was really tough. Actually, what I remember about that trip is you and I stopped at Beans on the drive up from Wolfboro to get rain jackets because we had all of our winter gear, and we looked at the forecast, and it was like 40, 45, 50 degrees for like 3 days straight, and it rained. I'm like, man, it's kind of like what you were saying, when you have all your winter stuff, like I didn't have a raincoat, and I still have it. It was like a bright orange LL Bean, like $20 raincoat. Nice. And then it froze solid. Yeah, and then it was a skating rain. Really cold and really windy. I remember trying to teach the guys about ice, and we had to get kind of in the cedar grove a little bit just to get out of that wind because it was so fierce. Oh yeah, we hiked across, right? Yeah, I remember that hike. It was like, it was like brutally cold and windy. But it was cool though, because that's when you learn what your gear is made of and what you're made of when it's like 40 below and windy, and like we gotta get out there, and that'll learn you. That'll teach you a lesson or two. Yeah, it's super fun though. That was weird. Yeah. So fly fishing. We've been rambling. I don't even know how long, but so the last 5 of the 10 things. Should we do a super quick recap? What were the first 5? I have no idea. So we talked about it started with love. A lot of strands, dude said. So we started off with love. You gotta love the sport. You gotta love what you're doing, and that's true of anything in life. If you don't love it, you're just not going to stick with it. And like we'll get to a little bit later in this list. Fly fishing will definitely push you to your breaking point once in a while, and you gotta love being out there so you have something to fall back on when. Yes. So we had number 1 was love. Number 2 is your rod reel line combo. We don't need to rehash that. Number 3 were some flies. A couple of flies that you recommended, odds and ends, and technique. So we're going to jump right in with number 6, and number 6 is location. Right. That's the old real estate adage. It's location, location, location. It's what gives value to a house, and it's also how you find good fishable water. I had a few stories in my head. And I want to say that when life, and I'll get to location, this is like 5.5. When life gets weird, you got to be able to appreciate the weirdness, just like the weather today or whatever in life. And for some reason this morning, I woke up remembering this time I was fishing out west, and I was fishing a pretty small river, and I had 2 flies on. So sometimes when you're fly fishing, you have multiple flies on your line. I had 2 nymphs on, and you break your flies off quite a bit. And so I broke off both flies, which again happens quite a bit, and kept fishing, tied 2 new flies on. And I'm fishing a little bit. My bobber goes down, set the hook, I get a fish on. I'm pretty happy about that. And as I'm reeling it in, I see 2 flies, which is weird because if you have 2 flies on and you have a fish, one of those should be in the fish's mouth. So I'm reeling in, I see 2 flies on my line, and then I see the fish, and I couldn't really figure out what I was looking at. And so this is the weirdness that happens sometimes when you fly fishing, just living life, is that my bottom fly on my line hooked the loose hook of my broken off 2 flies, and they like linked together. And then on the 4th fly, there was a fish. It was the most
bizarre thing I think I've probably seen fly fishing in my life. So anyway, the point is that things get weird. Weird things happen. So with location, obviously a lot of that's going to depend on where you are and what kind of fish you're looking for. I'll kind of stay with the cold water and the trout fishing for now, just to keep this a little short. The best thing you can do is call a fly shop, is get that advice on where to go from someone who knows the area. Chances are they're going to point you into a location that they point everybody. They're going to send everyone to the same bridge, the same put in, the same place, just because it's probably a place that fishes well. And so they're probably going to send you to a place where you're going to see other people, which isn't always a bad thing, because you're going to be able to see other people and watch what they're doing and maybe pick up some technique and some tips. And it's going to give you people to chat with while you're on the river. So outside of just getting direct advice, either from calling a fly shop, you can spend some time on Google Earth and look for rivers. You got to know what the fish are looking for in order to find the fish. So fish really just need three things in life, especially cold water trout. They need oxygen, they need food, and they need cover. And so if you can find water that has those three components, if there's fish in the river, you're going to find them there. And so oxygenation happens when you have cold water, and that's why trout need cold water, because colder water holds more dissolved oxygen. And so the water needs to be cold. And anything that stirs up the water. So think about a big set of rapids, water crashing over a rock or a waterfall. That's going to infuse atmospheric oxygen in the water. Is going to dissolve it, and the fish can breathe it, and they're happy. So anything that kind of turns that water up is going to create oxygen. Also, that moving water is going to stir up food that lives on the bottom of the river. So little aquatic insects or other fish or crayfish. It's going to stir those up and create kind of a the smoothie scenario where there's this kind of food everywhere in the water column for fish. And then given that trout typically live in shallower water, and there's reasons for that, they need cover. If you look for fish in a river, you're probably going to see osprey and eagle and other birds that will prey on fish, not to mention otters and aquatic mammals that will eat fish. Eventually, trout are always getting preyed upon, and they're very aware of that, and they're very wary. So they need some kind of cover. That cover can come in the form of water depth. It can come in the form of an undercut bank of a river where they can kind of hide under the bank, or it can come in the form of a down tree, down logs, or even aquatic vegetation. So if you can find those three things, chances are you're going to find trout. I'm typically looking for water that's maybe a foot to 6 feet deep. If it's any shallower, there could be fish in there. Trout can live in a few inches of water if they have to, but typically a foot is kind of on that lower end where you're consistently going to find fish. And 6 feet is about the depth where fishing to them is accessible. And if they're any deeper than that, you need different gear, and it's a little harder to pull them out of deeper water. So if you have all those things, a little bit of moving water, we don't want big class 6 rapids. So even like a ripple, which is something that just creates a little disturbance on the surface water, or the surface of the water, that'll create food, oxygen, and even that little surface disturbance will create cover for a fish. So those are some of the water features. And again, that's specific to trout and rivers. Does that paint a picture for you, Tim? Does that work for you?
Yeah, no, I like that. Pretty succinct. Yeah.
Another good thing, I'll throw out there, another good thing to look for, and some people don't like to fish bridges because bridges are artificial. And fly fishermen can be very traditional. There's this kind of duality of tradition and innovation with fly fishing, where some people don't like to fish around bridges because it's a man-made piece of cover or a disturbance to the watershed. But you think about what a bridge does. First of all, when we're talking about location, we want to make sure we're staying legal. And I don't know the land access or trespassing laws in all 50 states, but out here in Maine, you can access a river via a bridge. And that's the same in Wisconsin and Montana as well. A bridge offers access to a waterway that's legal. Montana is different, where Montana, everything under the high water mark of a river is considered public. And so you can walk anywhere where there is water some time of the year, you can walk legally. Out here in Maine, landowners own the banks of the river. I believe it's until all the way till half of the river is owned by a landowner, but it has to be posted. So if it's unposted, that means you're not legally, fully covered to walk there, but it's accepted that you can walk on that bank. So anyway, the point is that just call your local Fish and Wildlife or Department of Natural Resources and ask them what your local or statewide public access laws are, and just go with that, because you want to make sure you're staying legal out there. There's a really famous river back in Wisconsin where a couple of the really historic traditional pools for lake run rainbow trout, tongue-in-cheek call them steelhead. It's a very traditional steelhead river in Wisconsin. And a couple of the really, really old traditional holes were closed this year to private access because people were being knuckleheads and littering, and we'll get down to etiquette on the 9 here, but they just weren't being cool. So access was lost. So be cool, follow the rules, and that'll keep you in good stead.
So yeah, but we were talking about bridges. So bridges are good access. They have overhead protection, so the eagles aren't going to be swooping in. There's usually a deep hole because when they're digging out the bridge, putting in the pilings, there's usually a hole right by the bridge, and there's definitely like big obstructions to the current. If they're like bridge abutments and things, that means there's a dead slack water space behind it, which are also great river features. But anything else about bridges? Trolls, gotta watch out for them.
Don't burn them in life.
Yeah, don't burn the bridges.
Yeah, Jeff Bridges is pretty cool.
Jeff Bridges is cool. The dude.
Yeah, Madison County, a lot of bridges there.
Yeah.
No, you're absolutely right. And so bridges are one of those places where I know some people don't fish them, but you're right. Bridges create artificial cover. I woke up this morning also trying to figure out why, because I'm not a structural engineer, why there is usually a big deep pool under a bridge. You're right. It probably has to do with how they dredge it out to get the pylons in or whatever. But yeah, there's usually deep water. And then you're looking at either a constriction with the bridge, which is going to increase the flow rate of the river where it gets kind of squeezed to go under the roadway. And that's going to create more current, which is going to create, again, more opportunity for food to get kicked up and brought to the fish, which are probably waiting on that downstream side of the bridge in the eddy or the calmer water, waiting for that food to kind of get escalated by, if I can make up a new verb today. So bridges they're not a bad place to start.
Yeah, and they're certainly easy to drive to, right? Usually. Yeah.
I like driving over. They keep me out of the water.
I went to college with a bunch of guys who ended up as civil engineers, so like designing bridges and roadways, and a couple of these guys were kind of knuckleheads. So I almost wish that the bridge designer, they had to put like his name on it, because there were a few of those guys that if I saw that they were responsible for the bridge, I wouldn't drive over it. I don't trust them.
No,
anyway,
it's all toothpicks and popsicle sticks. So yeah, I don't know. Just call around, look online. Google Earth can be a neat tool for fly fishermen to find new water. If you come up for the May Learn the Intro to Fly Fishing class in May that we're running up at Jack Mountain, which we still have a couple spots open for. We're gonna go to a waterway. I'm not gonna name it on the interwebs, but we're gonna go to a waterway that I did a lot of the original scouting for on Google Earth. And so it was a waterway that we're familiar with at Jack Mountain, but not necessarily for fishing as much. And so I followed this kind of waterway up to its headwaters, and using Google Earth, I was able to locate a place where I could see a bridge for access and some moving water, which was clearly white water on Google Earth. And I could see the features, the hydrological features of that river on Google Earth. And just by using that one online tool, I was able to be like, okay, this is a good spot I want to check out. So Google Earth is kind of a cool thing for that.
And it's super cool for an area like Aroostook County, like northern Maine, where there's tons and tons and tons of water and tons of land. And I think there's one fly shop. So typical like small town fly shop, you go in, there's probably one river running through town, and they can tell you like the 5 access points of their one waterway. But what we have in Aroostook County is like 7,000 potential fishing spots and one little fly shop. So you're not going to get that sort of like local intel by going to the fly shop and buying a couple of flies. And that's where Google Earth really is your friend, because it's more remote. There's fewer people around. There's less people to ask. And maybe nobody's fished that piece of ground for, 20 years or so.
Oh yeah, especially up in northern Maine. I mean, as long as you have cold water, there's going to be brook trout in that river, in that watershed. And yeah, I mean, I always recommend people, in Maine, we have a Maine Gazetteer that shows all the roads, logging roads of the state of Maine, which is probably in every Mainer's vehicle, or it should be. And if you're planning a weekend, just circle a few of the places that you have a couple rivers and easy access points, and just go put the boots on the ground and check it out. The more adventurous you are, the more willing you are to kind of bushwhack through the swamps and all the thickets and get to some of these more obscure places, the more of those little gems you're going to find. I agree. I'm sure that there's pools and little sections of creeks up north in Maine that haven't been fished this lifetime, this generation, or last 100 years even, because there's just so many small creeks up north that hold fish that there's just not that many people fishing up there.
Or even some of the bigger rivers. I think you and I both have had the luxury of seeing most of the county, most of northern Maine by canoe over the years. And you think about just some of those little stretches of the Allagash or the Aroostook, like that it's not near a road, it's not near a campsite, and probably nobody's fished it, in forever. So it really is full of like hidden gems. I'm sure that some of the guides who work for some of the lodges in the North Maine woods have, they probably have like their 500 favorite little spots and stuff. But other than those guys, like it's a bit of a production to get in there. So
it is. I mean, it's still kind of a Wild West up there. I mean, you go up to, South Central Montana, and there's the major rivers, whether it's the Madison, the Yellowstone, the Gallatin, all around the Bozeman, Livingston area that everyone goes to. That they're just the huge rivers, they're iconic, they're full of fish. And Montana doesn't have the network of smaller little tributaries that just go everywhere. Those watersheds out west are bigger and relatively small, kind of, so to speak.
Wait, they're bigger and they're small.
Yeah, they're bigger, but the rivers are big, but the areas they drain are narrower, and there's just less water out there. You go to northern Maine and you can't throw a rock without hitting a pond or a river or some kind of waterway up north. So Maine does present some neat challenges of like, where do you go? It's a little analysis paralysis kind of thing versus out west where you're like, I'm just going to go to this one of these 4 rivers and have a great day. So northern Maine presents that challenge of kind of where to go, but huge reward in that personally.
All right, so I think that's location. Let's go on to number 7. Hire a guide. What do you mean by that? I mean, I think I know what you mean by that, but explain that thought process to me a little bit.
Yeah, so it's kind of like you actually just said it pretty well, that you can spend a lot of time learning a waterway or learning an ecosystem or one river or a set of rivers. And I've done it, you go out and maybe the river's a bust. Maybe just for whatever reason that section of river isn't holding the numbers of fish that you want or that make the day fun. And so you're like, okay, you go home, check it off your list. Or even on some of the major waterways that are great fisheries, you can go out and hit stretches that just aren't as productive. Or maybe you're not tuned into the hatches or the flies or the fish species or the other aquatic invertebrates that the fish are eating. And so you're just not going to time it right. So you're not going to have that experience that you're probably looking for. And so I always recommend hiring a guide, not only for like your own personal development, like if you want, you can get tips on casting or fly selection or stuff, but you're in that one day or half a day you spend with a guide, you're going to get the insight into that waterway, that watershed, that river, that stretch of river, that 2 miles river, whatever you're fishing or whatever you're interested in. You're going to get that instant kind of better picture of what's going on and how to fish that waterway. I've done both, where I've tried to figure out watersheds on my own, and it works eventually. It takes some time, And then, I fished, the first few times on the Yellowstone out west with a buddy who was a guide, and then a really good friend who had done a little guiding as well. And, just spending a day with those two guys, it clicks, because then you're seeing what they're doing, you're seeing their fly selection, where they're casting to on the water and kind of why. And then it all kind of makes sense without having to kind of paint by numbers and wait to see what the picture looks like. You just get it right away. And then you can go out and recreate that experience, day after day.
I'll use the analogy, like you can learn to be a novelist if you just get like a typewriter, a pen and a paper, but hanging around with other people who are more skilled at it, you will dramatically shorten your learning curve. So I think when you say hire a guide, it's almost like the idea of like a short-term mentorship. So if you go out with somebody who knows what they're doing and has local knowledge that they've developed over the years, it just will dramatically shorten your learning curve and probably be way more fun.
Well, yeah, and I'll throw out there too that fly fishing. So my brother's a pro golfer, not pro in the aspect of PGA, but he's a pro. He runs a golf course, and so we have that kind of running joke about fly fishing and golf being very similar. And both activities are confidence activities. Where, sorry if I just beeped here. This is also a 20-year-old computer. Both activities require confidence to do well. And maybe whatever your hobby is, you can make that connection. Like, oh yeah, needlepoint is a confidence activity too. Can't imagine it would be, but maybe it is. With golf and fly fishing, if you don't have confidence in what you're doing, you're not going to be able to do it very well. And I'll leave golf aside because that's pretty obvious. That's all a head game. With fly fishing, it's less of a head game, but you still need to have confidence that the fly you chose and the place you chose to put that fly in that river are going to work. And so the way this looks is people always say, well, what's the best fly? What are the top flies? Of course, I did that last week, but what are the flies I need, or what's the best fly for right here? And like I said last week, I'm not going to say it doesn't matter, but to a certain degree, it doesn't matter. What does matter is your confidence that fly is going to work. Because if you fish a fly with confidence, you're just going to catch more fish because you're going to be paying attention. You're going to be attentive, which I think is redundant. Paying attention and being attentive. Is that redundant? They mean the same thing? I think so.
It's close. Same root word.
Apparently I really wanted to drive home the paying attention thing. If you're going to be confident, you're going to fish that fly better and you're going to catch more fish. And so to me, that's the thing that going with the guide will give you is confidence that you're putting your fly in the right part of the river with the right technique at the right time, and it's going to work because you've seen it work. And once you've seen it work, you're going to get the confidence that it'll work again and again and again and again. And that's when you start turning the corner as a fly fisherman. You have that confidence that when you go out, you know what you're going to do. You know that it's going to work. And if it doesn't work, that's just the universe telling you that you're not that cool. But confidence, that's what going with the guide will give you. Confidence that what you're doing is going to work.
Okay, moving on to number 8, practice stillness.
Yeah.
That sounds very like Zen, like, somebody's doing that lotus pose on the side of the river. What do you mean by that?
It's fly chi.
Fly chi. I like that. That's rich.
And if nothing else good comes out of it today,
nothing else good is coming out of this today.
That's it. I've peaked. I think we should wrap this up.
So I'll tell you a story about an old guy that I knew. He's been gone now, passed on, probably 25 years. But growing up in New Hampshire, there was this little teeny stream, and it was a good long walk through the woods. And he told me about pulling huge trout out of that when he was a kid. And I was like, and the stream, like literally, it was probably only like 4 feet across, right? But when it went through this big marshy area, it got really deep. So there were these huge undercut banks. And I think he said he was pulling like 18-inch brookies out. This was like 1915 or something. But anyway, and he said, and here's the secret. I'm like, here's how it did. Because when you walked next to this stream, it was kind of marshy, so that the fish would feel the impacts of your footfalls. So old guy Pete says he says it would take me about 45 minutes to walk out there. He says, so I'd walk out there and I'd sit down about 5 or 6 feet from the stream so the fish couldn't see him. And he says, I would sit down and I would smoke a cigarette. And then he said that would take me about 7 minutes to smoke the cigarette before I'd throw in a line. And he says that amount of time, like this is essentially practicing stillness, but that amount of time would give the fish, they would probably be agitated when they could feel his footfalls as he approached. And that amount of time for him to smoke the cigarette would allow them to get relaxed. And then he could drop in a line and hook them and game over.
Yeah. You know, what's really cool about that is that the mountaineer Paul Petzel, I believe, I think it was Paul Petzel, said the same thing about emergency situations when he would be a mountaineer guide, is that if anything happened, if you got lost, unless there was like an urgent need to do something, he would smoke a cigarette, because that would give him that like 5 minutes to calm down, assess the situation, and not make an error in your first move in an emergency. So I feel like we're endorsing smoking right now.
Well, this was like World War II era. So
Yeah.
it was way back.
Smoked.
Smoking's not good. Don't smoke.
It's not. Just smoking the proverbial cigarette. Maybe just scroll Instagram for 5 minutes. Just kidding. But no, it's absolutely true.
Nothing.
I don't know which is worse.
I was listening to a book the other day, and they basically said that social media is the tobacco of our generation, like
God,
the negative effects. So it's funny that you said that unprompted.
Wow, that's funny.
The comparison.
Wow. Well, I don't even know where to go from that. I couldn't agree more. Well, yeah, it's funny because I've seen that up north a few times. We're getting those real spongy, soft, kind of swampy areas, and your footstep will literally send ripples out into the water. Excuse me, but it's true. So fish, like I said, are trout are very wary creatures, and they can see out of the water pretty well, because that's where a lot of their predation comes from. So they're always looking up. They don't look down because crayfish don't eat. They're always looking up because that's where their threats come from. And due to the refraction of light, they can actually see at a better angle than we think they can. So as you're approaching them, it's just like, when you put a stick in the water, the light refracts and the stick looks bent. The fish's vision is the same way. So they can actually see a lot further and a lot better than we think they can. So there's people that will wear out the knees of their waders because they'll crawl hands and knees to approach a river. And I think that's a really good goal. That's an ideal. I don't do that very often. One back surgery down, and I'm a little less nimble than I used to be, but that's a really good mental image, because that is how we should approach any kind of trout stream, is with kind of a real stealthy approach. And one of the places where this has been the most obvious to me is Depew Spring Creek, just south of Livingston, is a crystal clear spring creek, and the brown trout and the rainbows are huge for reasons that I can talk about later about spring creeks. But the fish are big, the water is super clear, and the fish are feeding all day long, and you can see them. It's like an aquarium where you're looking at 16, 18-inch brown and rainbow trout, and bigger, just living in this maybe 20 foot, 25 foot across river where the water's maybe 3-4 feet deep. And so you can see fish everywhere, and they're really, really hard to catch, which will go into number 10 on that list. But with that kind of waterway, I've seen people just crash into the water. Like they'll go from their car, they're suited up, they have their aquatic tactical assault equipment on, and they just crash into the water. They splash, they make a mess, and they're not going to catch anything because those fish are gone. Once a trout is scared, they'll typically go away and hide for X amount of minutes, 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 20 minutes, half an hour. Trout hold a grudge, they sulk, and if you scare them off, they're going to stop eating. And by sheer dint of what we're doing as fishermen, they're not going to eat. They're going to be really hard to catch. And so, not every situation, like if you're fishing at, bridge or whatever, where those fish are used to cars rumbling overhead and gravel falling in the water from the roads, maybe those fish are a little less wary, where you can just walk up there and you can start fishing. You don't need to slither up like a salamander. But, just think about it. The shallower the river is, the clearer the water is. You got to be quiet. Maybe you keep your voice down a little bit. You don't run. You don't jump into the water. You don't throw rocks. You don't bring your quote unquote fishing dog with you. There's a good quote that says, "There's no such thing as a good fishing dog, because dogs, by definition, love splashing, swimming, chasing things, barking, and all those just don't really lead to a good fly fishing dog."
Well, yeah, I'll use the analogy of like if someone's going out hunting, stealth is super important. You don't go out hunting with a boom box and like a barbecue and making all sorts of racket. And if you just approach fishing the same way, realizing that you are trying to catch that fish, like you're the predator, and stealth, find me a predator that doesn't use stealth. And I think you'd have a hard time trying that. So much so that I saw this movie about this alien that was chasing Arnold Schwarzenegger through the jungle. And I think its name was Predator. And like, you couldn't see this thing or hear it. So yeah, be like that guy.
Can you believe 2 future governors in that movie?
I told you that story.
Who would have seen that?
Right?
Who would have seen that coming?
I had a group of guys. When was this? Was like 2011 or something. I don't remember what the political climate was at the time, but we were going into the Allagash, and I had a guy from England, a guy from Canada, a guy from Denmark, a guy from France, and there's some other country represented. And like people started talking about politics, and they're like, they asked me, they wanted to understand American politics. And I said, all you got to do is watch the movie Predator, because it has the future governor of California and the future governor of Minnesota in it. And then you'll understand everything. And then I just shut up and didn't say anything else the whole time. So to this day, I don't know if they thought I was 100% serious or not. But so if you're an undergraduate right now studying political science, drop out of school, watch Predator 10 times, and you'll know everything about modern American politics.
I mean, you just got to wonder if like the lesser actors in the movie just feel like they haven't really lived up to their expectations. I mean,
like the guy who was like selectman for his town or something, and he's like, I never amounted to anything because I wasn't a governor like those 2 guys.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was thinking about that when you mentioned like we're hunters. Like when you're fishing, you're hunting. And I think that's a mentality that it doesn't always come across in the fly fishing world as much as it probably should. Because on one hand, this is like a peaceful pastime where we're going out there and communing with nature, and we have all this technique of false casting and tying these little imitation insects. But on the other hand, like it's hunting. The goal of fly fishing is to catch a fish. Whether you keep that fish or not, it doesn't matter, because the act of fooling, catching, subduing, and capturing that animal is like 9/10 of hunting.
I thought the goal was to get a lot of likes on your Instagram post from like with the stupid grip and grin when you're holding the fish at the end of the day. That's not the goal.
That's why my Insta name is Extreme Trout Hunter. 0169, because it was already taken 0168 times.
The real Extreme Trout Hunter.
Yeah, there was I can't remember the name of the author, but he was talking about in the world of eco-psychology how like nature photography has become a surrogate activity for the hunting, where it's a good hobby. If you're into like photography, nature photography, that's cool. It's fine. But if people use that to replace the hunt, to replace that hunting experience, which is so important, visceral and integral to who we are as a species, that people will kind of substitute these quasi, not fake or false, but surrogate. It's a replacement activity. And so that kind of is like the fly fishermen who are old. And I met one guy, I say this as if there's a lot of people out there. I met one guy who would fish with flies, but he cut the bend off his hook. So he would have every aspect of fly fishing, but when the fish would take the fly, obviously there was no hook, so it wouldn't penetrate the fish's mouth and he wouldn't actually catch it. But he would get the take, which, for some people is enough. And I was thinking, that's cool. Maybe like part of me wishes someday I'll be satisfied with that, but it's not it. Like there's a very cliched slogan in fly fishing that the tug is the drug. that tug on your line and the bend in your rod, it's an extension. It's a transference of energy from that fish through your line, through your rod, into your hand, into your heart. No, it's true. When you feel that rod bent over, that is the moment of why we do it. And it's ephemeral, it's fleeting. It's like a 15, well, could be how long that fight is, but it's like a minute long, maybe 10 seconds of an experience.
Sort of like the dopamine hit you get when you see that somebody likes your awesome fly fishing picture on Instagram. It's fleeting.
Especially when that person is a Trout Hunter Extreme 1069.
Yeah, or the real Trout Hunter Extreme.
The real Trout Hunter Extreme 1069. And you're like, wow, a celebrity liked my post.
Yeah.
I'm done today. That's like my fly cheat. Like, you just check out, like, I've peaked. That's it. I'm there. Yeah, no, it's true though. It's that moment. It's that brief little moment that we spend all this time, energy, apparently 45 minutes already of talkie time.
Really? Wow.
I don't know, 40, half an hour. But even last year at the intro to the fly fishing class, one of the days we just fished Swapan Lake up in the county. And guys were catching little perch, little panfish. And you would think that they were landing that 38-inch lengths. They were having a blast. It was like the most fun they were having that day. And it was like me in the story last week of catching the white perch on the West Branch. It's that feeling that I've hunted, I'm successful, my family's going to eat today. I'm a winner. I'm cool. I did it.
All right.
Yeah.
So let's move on to number 9. Number 9, etiquette. And etiquette that's French for like a fancy kind of fly leader, right?
I think it's a fish racket.
A fish racket.
Because when I look at the word etiquette, I see racket.
Okay.
And so fly fishing is a racket. That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
That didn't come out right. Yeah.
Don't be a jerk. Is that?
Don't be a jerk. Just be cool, man. Just be cool.
Well, like, for example, if somebody else is like crawled on their hands and knees to get to this little pool and you just come barreling down the bank, scaring everything within half a mile, like, that's kind of bad etiquette.
That sucks. I was hiking once and I saw a kid and he had a boombox strapped to his backpack and I could see a box of Hostess zebra cake sticking out the side of the backpack and like this blasting music. You could hear it down the trail. Don't be an idiot. Don't be like that.
Yeah, don't let your actions negatively impact someone else out there. Or other things would be, don't litter, pick up litter if you see it. But here's a bit of etiquette that I want to throw out there for everybody in podcast land. So imagine, somebody just follows their dream, finally opens up their little fly shop in their small town. And, they're probably not killing it. They're probably not, driving to work in a new Maserati or something. They're probably just getting by. And you know what people do all the time? They'll show up and ask for free stuff in the form of information and not buy anything. So really good etiquette. You want to get a little bit of local intelligence from somebody in the know, like at the fly shop, buy 3 or 4 flies, demonstrate your willingness to support their business by buying a couple of things from them. And then maybe you spend a few dollars, maybe they give you a little bit better information. Maybe they don't send you to the same bridge that they send everybody to. Maybe they say, well, we'll send you somewhere better.
And for God's sakes, nothing should stop you from going into a fly shop with a case of beer and a bucket of fried chicken. Who doesn't love beer and fried chicken? Fly shop employees, like you said, probably aren't crushing it. And, free beer and free fried chicken lunch, that'll get you a long ways in a fly shop.
So you're saying get them all like drunk off of chicken and beer and then hit them up for information?
I mean, you should probably be at that point anyway. So, but no, you're right. Another thing that really kills me is when people go into a fly shop and they'll want to test out 8 rods and then they'll go home and buy one online because it's cheaper. And like, I will say, I do shop online, but I also make a point, like you said, if I go to a fly shop, I buy something. Out here in Maine, I go to Maine Sport Outfitters. I'll give them a little plug because they're a great fly shop over in Rockland. It's a great store. And I buy online because I do, I have a budget. But fly shops are closing everywhere. The local mom and pop fly shops, it's hard. It's a hard life to kind of scrape by on. And a quick story, I was telling this to a friend yesterday. I went to a fly shop in Montana a bunch of years ago looking for a very specific rod, length, weight, company, and they didn't have it. And I used like hey, do you have any more in the back? The guy's like, we don't have a back. You know, we're not Dick's Sporting Goods. You know, we don't have this unlimited, back room supply. And so I just bought a different rod. And I didn't even really like necessarily need it. It wasn't what I was exactly looking for, but I love it. It was comforting. It was satisfying, because in our culture, we want everything that we want exactly all the time, and we want it to be cheap. And so there was something very like novel and very nice about going to a fly shop and not getting exactly what I wanted, but getting something that was a little different. But I loved it, and it worked, and that was kind of cool. So not to belabor it, shop local, for goodness sake.
Yeah, that old adage, like if you want to have a nice restaurant in your town, you better go to eat there. Support your local businesses, or even if it's not your town, support small local business, right? Because I can tell you that the guy selling the fly rod at Walmart doesn't really care about you or you having a good day, and but the guy just getting by at the local shop, he probably does care. That's probably why he doesn't. Okay, and lastly, number 10, the frustration meter.
It's funny. I realized I probably shouldn't have ended this list on like frustration. I should have ended it on something like really positive and happy and motivating people to get out there and fish. But I needed a 10, and that's something that, if you manage expectations of an activity, you're gonna be a little happier. And I guess I throw it out there because it's good for people to know that you will get frustrated. Again, it's like golf. If you play golf, you're going to have frustrating days. If you needlepoint, I don't picture really having a frustrated moment needlepointing or crocheting or knitting. I picture that just being like, you're not gonna have a bad day. You're just gonna knit, and it's gonna be like relaxing or whatever.
But on the flip side of that, though, you're probably not gonna have an awesome day either. It's pretty level. Yeah. Like your expectations are pretty level. Whereas, with fishing, with golf, maybe with golf, you go out there and your best game of your life, right? Best game you ever had, and you'll remember it for the rest of your life. Right. Are you ever going to have those? You don't have the highs and lows, say, with knitting.
What do you do with your best day fishing? You put that picture on Instagram.
Yeah.
Damn, your best day. And that's all you see online.
Hashtag my best life.
Yeah. The real extreme trout hunter, 1069.
You got it.
So yeah, you're gonna have tough days. Your gear is gonna break. I have broken rods because I've caught the same stupid tree behind me trying to reach a fish 20 times straight. I've lost a handful of flies, and I lose my cool, and you pull a little too hard, bam, your rod snaps at the tip. I have had days fishing where I've got back to my car and just had a little freak out moment where you just spaz, maybe you yell a little bit, maybe you just release some of your energy and frustration, anger. And like, I guess I like to throw it out there because I don't want anyone going fishing and having that moment and then feeling bad about it, because everyone's been there. Everyone's gotten super frustrated. And I will say that I have snagged myself really deep in the back of like my ear and my neck because I've gotten frustrated with a fly, because I've gotten frustrated, and then my casting deteriorates, and I try to just, Thor's hammer this fly out there, and then, bad things happen. So maybe just end on that. Like, if you feel yourself, getting to that point, maybe just have a beer, have some snacks,
practice the art of fly chi.
Fly chi, right? That is when you put the rod down and the fly chi moment happens. I guess fly chi would have a rod in your hand. I think there's a forthcoming book. Keep an eye out.
The Art of Fly Chi. We need to have
Fly Chi.
Like an Instagram picture of it's going to be all about the poses, right? So you can pose with your rod and bring the fly chi energy into the world. Think of like the picture, like the Buddha, like sitting in the lotus position, but it'll be a guy, standing with his waders on and a fly rod in one hand. But there's got to be a certain fly chi pose. That's your homework. Come up with that.
And I think what you're going to witness if you really follow this movement, which is already a movement, I'm sure it's already on Instagram, because I'm sure someone was listening who said that's dope.
Don't worry, no one's listening.
What you're going to see is the full transformation from the carnal hunter, which was the real trout hunter 1069, into the real fly chi hunter, 1069.
Yeah, well, it's the process of achieving enlightenment on the stream side.
It is. It's we're all going for that one way or the other.
Yes.
But anyway, that is a top 10 list for you right there, and I sincerely hope that helps people. I know that we just talked a lot. We threw a lot of things out there, but these 10 things that we talked about, if you can at least use those for reference, just internalize them a little bit. Hopefully that'll help. But my goal is that this simplified, probably didn't, because that's just our nature. I hope this simplified things for anyone listening just a little bit.
Yeah, so if you're interested in going further and practicing and cultivating the art of fly chi in yourself, we've got a 3-day intro to fly fishing class that Paul's going to be teaching at the field school in Northern Maine coming up in May. And then in September, we've got some guided fishing opportunity on the West Branch of the Penobscot, big water, big fish, big fun times.
2 weekends. Two
weekends of that. And we'll have links to that in the show notes. And should we tease out what's coming in 2023 now? Is that worth doing, or should we keep those cards close to our chest?
Well, I don't think you and I have the capacity not to just keep talking.
So 2023, we've been in discussions about having a week-long fly fishing guide training class. There isn't really anything like that in the Northeast. I know there's some big ones out west. But we were talking about some of the awesome traditions that we have in the Northeast, so instead of say like jet boats and what are those big boats, those big rowboats they have that they put on the Western rivers out there? What are those called?
Well, like a drift boat.
Drift boat, that's what it is.
And you see them in Maine once in a while,
but it'd be more like learning how to pole canoes and sort of the traditional Maine guide thing. So like poling a 20-foot canoe and holding in a rapid, things of that nature. So definitely regionally focused. If you go to a Western fly fishing thing, maybe it's all about dry flies, and we don't have the huge hatches in the Northeast like they do more west. So, more focused on things, the traditions of the local area and the region. We're talking about that.
Yeah, and that would be so much fun. Again, something I wish I would have done 20 years ago. Like you and I both know, Tim, guiding is, it's a people industry, it's an entertainment industry, and it's a care industry. And what the physical activity is matters. And so if in this week-long course, you'll learn the nuts and bolts mechanics of fly fishing, tying knots, all that good stuff. But there's also the client care, and that's so huge. Keeping people laughing, keeping them warm, keeping them well fed. That's the true mark in my mind of a good guide, is someone who can not only provide the activity but provide just a great experience all around for your clients. And so I'm really excited. I think this is going to be a really neat program. I'm excited to get it going next year.
Cool. Yeah. So we have no information on that yet. So I don't have anything else to give you, but we'll probably write up a web page on it. I don't know, this summer or something. So you can look for that if you're interested. But we've gone on a long time on a lot of random tangents. So I think let's wrap this one up. But thanks again, Paul, for being on the podcast. It's always fun to chat. And maybe this stretch of warm weather is getting you thinking about spring, getting out on the water.
It is. I mean, we could go fishing today. Maybe that's my next move.
Yeah. Awesome.
Well, as always, Tim, great to see you. Great chatting.
Yeah. And let's do it again sometime.
All right. Sounds good, buddy.
See ya. You have been listening to the Jack Mountain Bushcraft Podcast. For more information on our professional wilderness guide training programs that are college accredited and GI Bill approved, visit us on the web at jackmtn.com.